I see quite a lot is people talking about how they've applied for loads of jobs but really aren't getting anywhere. All they get is that automated email that goes, "Thank you for applying. I'm afraid you've been unsuccessful this time, but we will keep your CV on file." And part of the problem could be the way you formatted your CV isn't ATS friendly. So, what is an ATS, I hear you asking? An ATS is the acronym for an Applicant Tracking System, and the one that you're probably familiar with is Talio. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but you will come across it. Okay, now something you do have to bear in mind and think about is that when you're applying for a job, on average, a recruiter will spend 6 to 7 seconds reading your CV before they decide what they want to do with it. And before you get those precious seconds, it'll usually have to go through an ATS, which is designed to reject 75% of applications, so that they never even make it in front of a human eye. This is because it is now far easier to apply for a job than it ever was before. I mean, think about the Apply Now button on Indeed and LinkedIn. So recruiters are just being inundated with applications at a phenomenal rate. And an ATS is designed to filter down these huge numbers into a more manageable size to make life easier for the recruiter. And it does it by using criteria such as keywords, qualifications, and so on. And what you need to do is make sure that you are in that manageable number. So I'm going to talk about a few hints and tips to help you format your CV to beat the ATS and just give you the best chance that you can. So let's start with formatting. Keep it simple. You might want to stand out in a sea of applicants by having a nicely, interestingly formatted CV, but ATS systems won't like it. What they like is conformity and simplicity. If you use a creative style CV, the ATS will likely route your CV straight to that digital bin and you will get another application unsuccessful email. While looking at formats as well, I would like to say use Word. Don't use JPEG, Google Docs, images. I know these seem like a good idea, but they confuse the applicant tracking system. It is very easily confused, as I'll just talk about in a moment. When writing your CV, make sure you use standard fonts that you find in Microsoft Word, so Calibri, Times New Roman, Arial. Do not use that fancy font you found on the internet because it will confuse the ATS. Also, don't use things like emojis, graphics, symbols, logos, charts, and so on. Even stylized bullet points, you know those ones shaped like an arrow? They confuse the resume robots. When you're laying out sections, have distinct sections with a clear title in bold and a slightly larger font. Save the capitalization for the section headers as well. Don't use it elsewhere in your CV. And while I'm talking about don'ts, here's a couple. Don't use tables or columns. These also confuse the ATS robot. Use tabs instead. And headers and footers, don't use them. The ATS won't pick up on the words that are inside them, so don't worry about it. Okay, next section is to think about your word use. This is really critical. And I'm going to start with job titles. So, if you've had a slightly unusual job title, tweak it to be more conventional. So, right, if your job title is something along the lines of Tax Rockstar, Personnel Ninja, or Innovation Alchemist, which are slightly trendy at the moment, you may want to actually put Accounts Assistant, Recruiter, or Mechanical Engineer. Use standard section headers such as work experience, professional summary, work history, education, skills, and professional certifications. Try to include some keywords in these headers if you can, but don't try to be too clever because this could also backfire and you need to walk quite a fine line. Acronyms, right? Acronyms are fine, but the first time you write them, make sure you write them out in full. Don't just write IADC the first time you use it. Write International Association for Drilling Contractors in brackets IADC. This will just trigger a couple more keywords, which is actually the section I want to talk about next. You need to make sure you adapt your CV for each application. I mean, you should be doing this anyway, to be honest, but it's more important when you start to look at things like keywords. They're a big part of tailoring your application. And it's really important to get as many as you can into your CV without going overboard, which is what I'll actually talk about in a moment. To do your research into keywords, use services like Wordle or TagCrowd. This will help you pick out keywords in the job advert, the ones that occur most regularly, and actually we're throwing in adverts from across the industry to help you pick up these keywords. People that go overboard with them end up creating a CV that is unreadable. This is of no use to a recruiter. So the other thing to think about is if you go overboard, an ATS is sophisticated enough to know what you're doing and they'll reject your CV anyway. So just walk that fine line. It is really difficult and you'll have to use a bit of judgment. One of the ways to help you get around this is, and jam your CV full of keywords, is include a qualification summary. A nice bullet pointed section, not with those stylized arrows, filled with ATS friendly keywords that can concisely present your most important achievements, skills and experiences. This is good for the ATS, but it's also good for the recruiter. Vocabulary and terminology should be the same as the company you're applying to. So if they're using a very specific set of vocabulary, make sure and try and match it, because that's where their keywords will come from as well. Last point on keywords. Despite what you may have heard, do not bother putting loads of keywords into headers and footers and then putting the font to white. It doesn't work. ATS systems don't seek for data in the headers and footers anyway, so why bother? Okay, so hopefully these few points have given you something to think about the next time you're formatting your CV for a job. But let's think a bit laterally as well. It's not all about CV formatting. You can beat the ATS by bypassing it completely. And while you still have to follow a hiring company's procedures, so they're submitting an online application, it could be beneficial to contact a hiring manager directly. If you can find out who it is, send them a brief email, and I do mean brief, short. Explain why you're perfect for the role and add in a copy of a nicely formatted CV that is designed for human eyes. Okay. Now, the next thing to think about is that most companies have an employee referral scheme. So if you know someone that works there that can refer you or pass along a CV, this could help you beat the ATS, and it also increases the likelihood of getting an interview. Some research says by as much as tenfold, others say it doubles your chance. Whatever, a referral is really key. Okay, so I'm just going to finish, but I'd like to say that there's no point in about bitching and complaining about ATSs. They are here to stay, and they're an essential part of the recruiter's toolkit. So, that's the way it is. I hope this is useful, and we'll speak next time.